Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the young adult fantasy Firian Rising, and this is English Nerd. Today I have the distinct pleasure to talk to Nicole Galland, who is an accomplished author who's written 8 books, if I looked that up correctly, in a variety of genres. And the one that I really wanted to focus on today, the one that caught my attention and that I loved when I read it earlier this year, is Iago, which is a retelling of Othello from the villain's point of view. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
So I wanted to start just by asking, what is your background with Othello, specifically that play?
I have a little theater project that I do on Martha's Vineyard with my co-conspirator Chelsea McCarthy, who's an actor and director, and we're starting our 12th season of this. It's extraordinary.
Oh, wow.
We take Shakespeare plays and we adapt them for people who don't like to do Shakespeare plays. So we chop them way down to be about an hour and a half. We add a narrator, which is usually me, and we do something that's at least semi-comic with the take of it. And the beginning, we started it because we wanted to do all the obscure plays, and then we started with Hamlet, did the Scottish play and King Lear all in the first season, and then started the second season with Othello. And Othello has the distinction for us of being the only one that we didn't try to make funny, because it's so psychologically real and intense. And the story, the creation myth behind, so to speak, behind Iago is that we both agreed that we wanted this Irish actor named Billy Milady to come down to the vineyard and play Yago. And so he said, "Oh my God, I'd love to play Yago." And he came down, and we, when he arrived, he said, I haven't had a chance to read the script yet. And I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like most of the scripts, it's just, like most of our scripts, we change around a lot, but with Othello, we just loved it so much, we didn't do much." And he said, No, you don't understand. I've never read Othello.
And he's going to play Iago. That's amazing.
So my reaction was, why would you say you wanted to play Iago if you've never read it? And he said, "I'm not stupid. Everyone wants to play Iago, so there must be a good reason." So I had this slight feeling of panic, but what happened, he sort of unintentionally gave me this extraordinary opportunity to get at the play from Iago's point of view, because we had to sit down and basically do a crash course in what's happening in the play and what's happening with Iago. And he asked really great questions, because he wasn't coming into it on the assumption that he was the bad guy. And really he knew nothing, which was perfect. And so when he left, so we rehearsed for 2 days. That's the way that this set is set up. We have very little rehearsal. We do 2 performances and it's done.
Oh, wow.
And then he left, and I was still thinking about all of the really good questions that he had asked that I hadn't had time to answer. And so I was walking my puppy in the woods one day, and it just hit me like a thunderbolt. I understand where this character's coming from.
Oh, wow.
And I went home and I just started writing, and then didn't stop until I finished writing the book, basically.
That's incredible. Getting the chance to look at Iago from a different point of view. It's always been a character that's fascinated me, which is why I just bought your book on title alone, because I thought, ooh, somebody told the story from Iago's point of view, and ever since I was 14, and I was probably too young for some of the things in the book, but ever since I was 14, I have been fascinated by what makes him tick. His last line, "What you know, from this time forth I never will speak word," or whatever he says. I've thought, no, I need an answer, and I loved your interpretation of what that answer was. So
you know what? Can I just add one little thing? From a marketing perspective, this was a disaster. But after 400 years of Yago existing and nobody ever treating him in fiction at all, really, and certainly in books, the same spring that my book came out, so did another book called Yago.
No way.
Yes,
seriously?
It was written by a British author, and it was the sequel to Othello. So it's a very, very different kind of book.
That would
premise be. Yago is just a psychopath, unrepentantly, and at the beginning of the book, he escapes from the captivity that he's put in at the end.
Oh.
So
that's a very different.
It seemed like my kind of book, but I just thought that was interesting that all of a sudden Yago was in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was amazed by how how relatable you made him, because I didn't see a way for him not to be a psychopath and not to be that just purely evil kind of character. But anyway, but you had a different take. So as you were talking to the actor who was playing Yago and doing that performance a few years ago, what was one of the most interesting things that you discovered about the play as you were putting it on? Because I find as you look, especially with Shakespeare, the closer you look, the more you kind of realize and find. So what were some of the things that you found about the play?
Well, he kept asking that very good actor question of, why am I doing this? Like, why is Iago doing that? So we had to sort of, it was like peeling away layers of an onion and saying, well, he did X because Y happened. Well, why did Y happen? Okay, well, Y happened because, well, why did Z happen? And he really wanted it to make sense to him. And he said, like, I could just go on stage and be, like, incredibly evil and have fun with that, but I just would sort of like to understand what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, when you look at what has happened right before the play begins, Iago's rage is completely justified in the text and in the plot. What he does with the rage, not so much. But Billy wanted to know, like, what's my entrance? Like, why do I start off so pissed off? And the more I thought about the reasons that he had to be pissed off, the more totally justified the rage seemed.
Being passed over for the promotion, specifically, being the catalyst, or...
But also the interesting point that the person that he was passed over for, who's Cassio, Cassio has very little fighting experience, but Cassio's the guy that helped Othello have an illicit relationship through writing letters with Desdemona. So suddenly it looks like, not nepotism's not quite the right word, but cronyism of some sort.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then if you add that to the fact that Iago can do as much damage as he can because he's so completely trusted by everybody.
Yeah.
And
how did he get that way?
Right, how did he get that way? Like, we don't hear about anything evil that he did before the play begins whatsoever. All we know about who he was before he gets enraged by the antecedent scenario of the play is how honest and good he was. So if he was an honest man who had a really close relationship with Othello and was a good martial escort, so to speak, and then all of a sudden he's passed over by this, this kid that helped Othello do something that might be romantic, but definitely was not honest. That, like, just pushes lots of buttons, and then Iago starts seeing red, and then goes off the rails.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's very true. When I first read the play, I assumed that some of the excuses that he came up with to take down Othello were just that. It was almost as though he was trying to come up with something that people would believe. Oh, well, what about this? I was passed over for a promotion. And what about this? He had an affair with my wife. And all these things that he didn't quite believe. But it's true that he did have some reason to be genuinely upset.
Passed over for promotion. The affair with the wife is like, there's nothing that really...
No, that seems like such a throwaway line. It's like, you're just trying to get the audience to be on your side.
And sometimes also, when you're really angry, you start to just look for justifications to be angry at the person that you're angry at. That's a very human thing. That's not psychopathic. That's normal.
That's true.
And he recognizes, like, he doesn't stay obsessed on that. He like you said, it's like this throwaway line. And I'm also angry because this might be true. But that doesn't become an ongoing thing. Whereas the fact that the first thing he does is he takes out Cassio. Getting Cassio removed from that position is his first and most important goal. And if he managed to, sorry, my phone is making noise. If he managed to stop there, I would actually sort of feel like, poor Cassio, but he kind of had it coming.
That's true. Yeah. So
and the other thing is, Cassio is an alcoholic, and he treats. Oh my God, I'm blanking on her name.
Bianca.
Yes, terribly. He treats the prostitutes so badly.
He leads her on,
he makes fun of her. He thinks it's hilarious that he's basically getting free sex because he's lying to her. I mean, that's really gross.
It is. That's the one place where I didn't really like Cassio in the play. I was surprised by your interpretation of Cassio in the book, but the more you're explaining the parts of his character you were focused on, it makes more and more sense, which is pretty cool. So, is Othello your favorite Shakespeare play? You've put on so many at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
Nearly the whole canon at this point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Except for King John, because nobody does King John.
We've done King John.
Did you seriously?
It's actually, in many ways, King John is my favorite.
No way. I've never read it, so I guess I can't really.
King John is structured. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but just for the record, King John is structurally flawed, and it is an issue that John himself is not a very sympathetic character. However, some of the greatest individual scenes, moments, and characters in the whole canon are in King John.
Really?
Yeah. The other thing, and I'm nervous about like straying into politics, but for the record, the third time that we did King John was shortly after Trump became president. And just for fun, because there were certain things in the script that reminded us of certain behaviors that he had just engaged in, Chelsea, who is a redhead, dressed up like Trump and played the character like Trump, and people thought that we had rewritten the play.
No way.
And we hadn't. Yeah.
Well, Shakespeare wouldn't have been mad at it. He was all about stirring the pot and making those comparisons.
Yeah, so we're all over King. I know the joke is that no one ever reads King John, but we're all over King John.
Really?
It's hard. For a while, Othello is definitely my favorite, and I'm fascinated by how the psychologically nuanced qualities in it that I think are more so than most of the other plays, with the possible exception of Hamlet. But another thing that's very cool about Othello is that it's the only one of the great plays that is not about royalty. Macbeth, King Lear, and Hamlet are all about royal families, and Othello is not. And even Julius Caesar is about, an empire.
Right.
Othello, amongst all of what are considered the great tragedies, is so intimate. And as a novelist, I love that. It's a small and deep pool to dive into.
Why do you think it's...
From that perspective, yes. Sorry.
Didn't mean to cut you off, sorry. Why do you think that Othello resonates so much with people today? Because it absolutely does. I mean, you said yourself, Iago's kind of in the air it was when the book came out. So what are some aspects of the play that continue to matter to people now, do you think?
I think there's two ways to answer that question. One is that it is like sort of what I just said, that it's such a dramatic, it's an intimate drama. It's real human beings. You don't have to be royalty to get sucked up into it. You don't have to be trying to take power in a political way. Yago's about trying to take power in a personal way. So I think on that level, it's always going to resonate with everyone. And it's just a very well-structured play. And there's really great roles because it's intimate. Any actor worth their salt wants to play Yago. And the other roles are great too, but Yago is definitely one of those, like Richard III. Like, who doesn't like to play really engaging villains who bring the audience in? So from that perspective, but then there's also the elephant in the room, which I haven't talked about much for a specific reason, which is the racism that the play features. And I think it's very important when you're talking about race issues in Shakespeare to say that I do not consider Othello a racist play. It is a play with racist characters in it. But he is a tragic hero, and his behavior is not the bad behavior that makes him the tragic hero, not just the hero, is not in any way tied directly to his race. I know plenty of white guys that would behave exactly the same way if they were treated that way. Right. So I don't feel like the play is racist, but there are racist elements in the play, absolutely. In contradistinction to that, The Merchant of Venice, I think, is innately a racist play, even though Shylock has his famous speech. But a lot of Shylock's behavior is attributed to his Jewishness by the play itself, as opposed to just the characters that are in it. And I feel like Othello is a different creature. But because race relations are a very important and very, very complicated and heartbreaking element in American society right now, obviously anything that looks at those should be on the table.
Right. That's one thing that makes Othello such a challenging play. But I agree, it doesn't feel like a particularly racist play itself, because Othello is such a complex character, and at the beginning at least, he is the noblest character, in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that except for this one thing, the jealousy,
right,
which is not innately an African-American, what's wrong with me? African quality. It's not innately Moorish. It's just human.
Right. Right.
But like, other than that one trait, which obviously he takes to a horrible extreme, he remains the noblest character. His suicide is an expression of his own horror and at his own stumbling in his nobility.
Yeah, exactly. I think, especially for the time, that it's a pretty sophisticated look at navigating some of those questions. So
absolutely, yeah.
So at the moment, retellings are all the rage. I mean, I write young adult fantasy, and there are so many fairy tale retellings and retellings of Greek myths and things like that. What is the value of retelling Shakespeare? I would love to see more Shakespeare retellings, but why did you decide to do that one in particular? I mean, you've started to answer the question already, but if there's anything else.
Well, I think I've explained why that particular story, but why Shakespeare in general, which is why we're still, after 12 years, like working our way through the canon, but we've almost finished.
Wow.
Shakespeare, like the Greeks, like the fairy tale, like the folk, he is one of the few individual writers who I feel taps into the collective unconsciousness of what makes humans need to be storytellers. We are all narrative junkies at heart, and he is one of the few individual writers who was genuinely able to tap into the kind of collective cauldron of stories and characters and particular dramatic tensions. Not the only one. I'm not saying he's the only one, but he's certainly the one that has come down to us through the ages the most. Because of that fact, there's a lot of weight on Shakespeare. People hear the name Shakespeare and they either think of a really boring English class they had to take in high school, or some god-awful play that they remember being dragged to when they were too young to understand. There's a lot of, or it's associated with rich people or academics. There's a lot of unfortunate baggage associated with Shakespeare. And so if you take the story and you do something else completely different with it, you are allowing it to step outside of the weight that the name Shakespeare has on it. It's a retelling than people might like. The best, even just changing the title, the best, not the best reimagined Shakespeare, but the best title for a reimagined Shakespeare was when there was a young adult remaking as a movie of Twelfth Night, and the title was She's the Man.
Oh yes, I love that.
Such a great title. And I myself had just written a screenplay, I didn't do anything with it, which was also a rewriting, a contemporary rewriting, and it had a different title, and it wasn't nearly as good a premise as that one. But as soon as I heard the title, I just knew that it was either Twelfth Night or As You Like It. Like, before I knew anything about the play, and then as soon as I read the screenplay, I was like, oh, they took the title. That's the best title. So I'm sorry I'm going on so much about the title, but the point is that title alone is going to attract a group of really enthusiastic moviegoers to hear a story that is not a story that they would necessarily be psyched about if they heard, oh, now we're going to go see Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. So it's, in a way, it's a clever remarketing of something that should not lose an audience because of the old marketing, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. The stories and the characters have the potential, at least, to be so amazing that stripping away that the preconceptions and allowing people just to experience it has a lot of value.
And then also, I mean, I should add, because this was definitely true of the example that I just gave, when you're giving it a modern setting in some way, you can also adapt not the meaning or the intention or the theme, but you can figure out ways to adjust it so that it speaks very directly to a contemporary audience. Mm-hmm. Shakespeare was not writing for the ages. Shakespeare was writing for his audience, because his audience were the only ones that were going to put money in his pocket, mm-hmm. in the pocket of the shareholders of the Globe Theatre. I mean, he was a very practical man, as well as being a great writer. And mm-hmm. So I don't think that he would object whatsoever to adjustments being made.
No, I agree. I don't think he would. I think he would agree with it and just...
Right. I mean, that's what he did. He took most of his plots were plots that are... Othello pre-existed as a plot. Hamlet pre-existed. There's maybe 3 of his plays that we think were not adaptations of earlier stories. He just told them better.
Right.
And by changing things. So, which doesn't mean that we're making it better than Shakespeare by changing it, but we're making it more accessible for our audiences, and it's better in that sense. It's better that it be seen than not seen. So whatever gets bums in seats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's convenient that he wrote only dialogue. I mean, he had exits and entrances, but it's just dialogue. So you can do pretty much whatever, and it's not at all forbidden by the play. As long as you can find some justification for it, you can really go to town. Which is fun. So just a last question here. What advice would you give authors who want to do their own retelling? Is there anything that has particularly helped you on the research side, or just as a professional author that you would like to let us know?
I think I got really excellent advice from an editor I worked with on my first or second book, my second book, which is based on a medieval poem. It's called Revenge of the Rose, and it's based on this comic 12th century, 13th century poem called Roman de la Rose, which I think may qualify as the first musical comedy, because there's like funny folk songs and ballads that are intercepted in it. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to do a huge shift of the original plot, a huge plot twist. Mm-hmm. And while maintaining the same structure. And this editor said, there comes a certain moment where you have to send the model home. So meaning like you use the original source material to get what you need, and then you need to be willing to let go of it if you want to create your own thing. So I probably should have said that second. That's the second piece of advice. The first piece of advice is really know what the model is, really genuinely understand what it is that you're riffing off of. A superficial understanding of what's going on with Taming of the Shrew might lead to something entertaining, but if you really are willing to sink your teeth into Taming of the Shrew, you can come up with something far richer in your adaptation of it. That's a particularly difficult one, but I struggle with that one. Like, go for it. Like pick the hard ones. I have an idea for a retelling of Hamlet that, weirdly enough, I don't think anyone's ever done, even though everybody's done everything they can with Hamlet. Like, he's even been translated into another species.
Oh, right. The Klingon Hamlet. Heard about it.
And when I think about, like, here's how I want to do it, I have to constantly question myself. Do I just want to do it that way because no one's ever done it that way? Or do I actually have something that I want to say? Don't be different just to be different. Don't adapt just because it's clever. Like, really understand what it is that draws you to it. And then once you have a profound understanding of what draws you to it and why you want to do it, then let go of it and let it become your own piece. You are allowed to do that. I'm giving you permission.
That's good, because one of these years, after I'm finished with a few other books, I want to do. I think I mentioned this to you once, the Laertes version of Hamlet, because he just
I can't
speaks
wait
to me.
That. That'll be very cool. And again, same thing. Like let it. I mean, you can also, speaking of Hamlet, what Tom Stoppard did with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is dead.
I love that.
because it's literally what's happening backstage.
Right.
And he managed to do it without altering the original. Like, the source material, when it appears, is unadulterated. So that's a very particular kind of exploration. But he also knew exactly why he was doing it. It wasn't, oh, wouldn't it be clever? He's doing something very specific. And when you're working on the play, you never have to think of it as the backstage version of Hamlet. You're always very aware of the urgency of what is happening with those characters.
Right, and that one manages to look at the same kinds of themes, and clearly he had a deep understanding of the play. It wasn't just a gimmicky thing.
Right, exactly. So don't be a gimmick. Like, don't make it a gimmick, but also let it be. Once you've figured out, like, sort of what the umbilical cord is between the original material and what you're writing, the umbilical cord needs to be there, but then you go and, like, you grow your baby on your own. That was a very strange metaphor.
That's sort of gross, but I see what you're saying. So are there any upcoming projects that you are coming out with that you would like to tell us about, leave us with? How can we support you and find you in the coming weeks and months?
Thank you for asking that. In the coming weeks, I'm finishing up writing. God, please may I be finishing up the sequel to a novel that I wrote, with Neil Stevenson, that was called The Rise and Fall of Dodo.
Okay.
And that's speculative fiction, and it's really thick. Actually, look, I'll do a little visual. This is the original. That's how thick it is. These are all my little note things, because I'm writing the sequel to it.
Right.
And I hope to be turning that in about a month or two. And the sequel is, the working title, this probably won't be the final title, is called Master of the Revels, which was a very important role in the Elizabethan and Jacobean court relative to Shakespeare. And so a lot of the book takes place backstage during the original production of Macbeth.
Ooh, fun.
That's been really fun. So Shakespeare geeks should totally check out the sequel.
Well, I don't know who you're referring to there.
Early 2021, I think.
Okay.
Not sure yet, but so that my brain has just been completely immersed in that. And I'm not sure what I do after that, because that's just been eating my life.
That's fair. I get that sort of obsessive focus. Yeah. All right. Well, that is wonderful. Thank you again so much for talking with me and sharing what you know with my audience, such as it is. So I'll let you go, but thank you. This has been great.
I really enjoyed speaking with you, and good luck with the Laertes novel. Seriously, when you've finished it, I would love to take a look at it.
I would love to send it to you. Hopefully it gets somewhere near the greatness that is Iago. So definitely check this out if you haven't already. All right. Well, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Alrighty. Bye-bye.